The conference chamber floated in the heart of Council Station Alpha, a massive structure that had stood for thousands of years at the center of galactic civilization. Through the transparent walls, 47 different species looked out at the swirling nebula that painted the void in colors their ancestors had named before humanity learned to make fire. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood at the podium, her hands gripping the edges as she looked across the assembled representatives. Behind her, holographic displays showed data that her team had spent 3 years compiling. Images of dead worlds, ancient ruins, and mathematical projections that all pointed to the same terrifying conclusion. "Members of the Galactic Council," Sarah began, her voice steady despite the fear coiling in her stomach. "We have brought you here today because Earth has discovered evidence of an existential threat to all civilized space." A ripple of movement went through the chamber. The Calothians, tall beings with crystalline skin that refracted light into rainbow patterns, shifted in their seats. The Morvathi, slug-like creatures who lived for centuries, barely moved at all. The younger species whispered among themselves, while the elder races watched with expressions that looked bored. Councillor Vexithari of the Calothian Dominion raised one long, glittering hand. "Ambassador Chen, your species has been part of the galactic community for exactly 15 standard cycles. In that time, you have requested 17 emergency sessions. Each time the threat you warned of did not materialize." Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she kept her voice level. "Counselor, those were misunderstandings based on our inexperience with galactic protocols. This is different. This is real." She gestured to the displays behind her. 3 years ago, our deep space monitoring stations detected anomalous signals from the region you call the Dark Reaches. At first, we thought they were natural phenomena, but further analysis revealed patterns, mathematical sequences, countdown signals. The hologram shifted to show images of ancient ruins discovered on dead worlds at the edge of known space, massive structures that defied conventional architecture, built from materials that resisted scanning. "We sent archaeological teams to investigate these ruins," Sarah continued. "What we found was disturbing. Every civilization that built these structures disappeared approximately 50,000 years ago. Not slowly, not through war or plague, but suddenly. Entire star systems went dark within weeks." Dr. James Morrison, humanity's chief xenoarchaeologist, stepped forward. He was a thin man with gray hair and tired eyes. "The ruins all contain the same warnings, written in 17 different dead languages. We've translated them. They all say the same thing. They return. They consume. They leave nothing." The chamber erupted in noise. Some species laughed. Others argued among themselves. The Morvathi representative, a being named Thulox who had lived for 3,000 years, spoke in a voice like grinding stone. "Young humans, we have records stretching back 40,000 cycles. We have seen species rise and fall. We have witnessed supernovas, black hole collisions, and dimensional tears. Your anxiety is understandable for a species so new to the cosmos, but we have seen no evidence of this threat you describe." Sarah pulled up another display. "With respect, Counselor Thulox, you haven't been looking. We've identified 17 dead zones in galactic space where no signals emerge, no life exists, and no natural explanation fits the data. These zones are moving, slowly, but they're moving inward toward populated space." She showed them the mathematical models, trajectory calculations, predictive algorithms that showed with 97% certainty that something massive was coming from deep space, following a pattern that suggested intelligence and purpose. "We call them the Devourers," Sarah said quietly. "Based on the ruins and the signals, we believe they are a force that emerges from dark space every 50,000 years. They consume everything in their path and then retreat. The last time they came, they wiped out dozens of civilizations. Now they're coming back." Vexithari stood, his crystalline body catching the light and throwing rainbow patterns across the walls. "Ambassador Chen, do you hear yourself? You are describing a threat that allegedly appears every 50,000 years like clockwork. This is mythology, not science. This is the fear-mongering of a primitive species that sees monsters in the dark, because you have not yet learned that the galaxy is a place of reason and order." Sarah felt her jaw tighten. "Counselor, we have hard data, mathematical models, physical evidence from the ruins. We have intercepted signals that we've partially decoded. They're not random. They're not natural. Something is out there and it's heading this way." "Then show us a ship." Vexthari said, his voice dripping with condescension. Show us a fleet. Show us a single piece of technology from these alleged devourers. Show us anything beyond ancient ruins and mathematical speculation. We can't, Sarah admitted. They're still too far away, but by the time they're close enough to see clearly, it will be too late to prepare proper defenses. The chamber fell silent for a moment. Then Vexthari began to laugh. It was a sound like wind chimes, beautiful and mocking. This is why your species was quarantined from Council military operations, Ambassador. You see patterns where none exist. You predict doom where there is only the natural chaos of the cosmos. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. We are not asking you to believe us on faith alone. We're asking you to look at the evidence. We're asking you to prepare defensive measures. We're asking for military coordination so that if we're right, we can face this threat together. Admiral Marcus Webb, commander of Earth's small but growing fleet, stepped forward. He was a broad-shouldered man with scars on his face from Earth's last major war. The Terran Defense Fleet is ready to commit all available resources to a joint defense initiative. We've developed contingency plans, defensive strategies, and evacuation protocols. All we need is cooperation. Thulax's ancient eyes studied the humans with something that might have been pity. Your species has been spacefaring for less than 100 of your years. We have maintained galactic peace for 40,000 cycles. We have defense networks, early warning systems, and military forces that your civilization cannot begin to comprehend. If there were a threat of this magnitude, we would know. Would you? Sarah asked, her voice sharp. When was the last time the Council faced an existential threat? When was the last time your military actually fought anything more dangerous than pirates and border skirmishes? The chamber went cold. Vexthari's crystalline form seemed to harden, the light within him turning sharp and angry. You forget yourself, Ambassador. The Council has maintained order across 7,000 star systems. We have prevented wars, ended plagues, and guided younger species toward civilization. Your arrogance is breathtaking. Sarah took a deep breath, forcing herself to remain calm. It's not arrogance, Counselor. It's fear. We've run the numbers. We've studied the patterns. In approximately 5 standard years, the Devourers will reach the outer colonies. In 7 years, they'll hit Council space. In 10 years, they could be at Earth. We're begging you to take this seriously. The Council chamber filled with debate. Some species were curious, asking questions about the data. Others were openly hostile, accusing humanity of trying to seize power through fear. The elder races, the ones who had ruled the galaxy for millennia, were uniformly dismissive. After 3 hours of argument, the Council voted. 43 species voted against taking any action on humanity's warning. Only 4 voted in favor, all of them younger species who had joined the Council recently and still remembered what it felt like to be vulnerable. Vexthari delivered the verdict personally. The Galactic Council has determined that humanity's claims lack sufficient evidence to warrant military mobilization. Furthermore, to prevent the spread of panic among less sophisticated species, humanity is hereby forbidden from disseminating these theories beyond your own territorial space. Any attempt to do so will result in sanctions and possible expulsion from the Council. Sarah felt something break inside her chest. You're making a mistake. No, Ambassador. You are making a mistake by allowing fear to cloud your judgment. This session is concluded. As the various species began to file out of the chamber, Sarah stood alone at the podium, staring at the data displays that no one believed. Admiral Webb approached, his face grim. What do we do now? He asked quietly. Sarah watched the counselors leave, saw their confidence and their certainty that the galaxy was safe under their watch. She thought about Earth, about the billions of people who trusted her to keep them safe. She thought about the signals still coming from deep space, growing stronger every day. We prepare, she said finally. They've forbidden us from warning anyone else, but they can't stop us from defending ourselves. We go home, we mobilize everything we have, and we get ready. They'll see it as a violation of Council protocols, Webb warned. I don't care. Sarah's voice was hard now, all diplomacy burned away. Let them sanction us. Let them expel us. When the Devourers come, we'll be the only ones ready. Before leaving the station, Sarah transmitted one final message to the Council's central database. It was short, only 3 sentences, but she made sure it was logged officially and couldn't be deleted. To the Galactic Council, Earth has provided all evidence available regarding the incoming threat. We have requested assistance and been denied. When the storm comes, remember we tried to help you prepare. The message was acknowledged but not answered. Sarah Chen left Council Station Alpha knowing that she had failed. The galaxy would not prepare, the elder races would not listen, and when the Devourers came, humanity would face them alone. On the journey back to Earth, Sarah stood in the observation deck of her ship looking out at the stars. They looked peaceful, beautiful, and utterly indifferent to the fate of the creatures that crawled between them. Somewhere out there, beyond the light of civilization, something ancient and hungry was waking up. Earth had 5 years to prepare for the end of the world. Sarah intended to make every second count. 5 years had passed since Ambassador Chen's warning fell on deaf ears. In that time, humanity had transformed. Earth's economy had shifted entirely to military production. Orbital shipyards worked around the clock, building vessels designed for one purpose: survival. Children learned combat drills alongside mathematics. Every able-bodied person received military training. The species that had once fought among themselves now stood united in preparation for a threat the rest of the galaxy refused to acknowledge. Then the signals stopped. For 3 days, the deep space monitoring stations that had been tracking the Devourers' approach went silent. Scientists worked frantically to determine if it was equipment failure or something worse. On the 4th day, they got their answer. The Morvathi colony world of Thulos III simply vanished from all communications. One moment it was transmitting normal traffic, commercial signals, and civilian chatter. The next moment, nothing. Complete silence. The Galactic Council dispatched a reconnaissance fleet to investigate. What they found would haunt galactic civilization for generations to come. Admiral Krell of the Council Defense Force was a Saurian, a species that resembled Earth's ancient dinosaurs, but with intelligence and technology that surpassed most races. His flagship, the Harmony's Voice, arrived at Thulos III, expecting to find a communications malfunction, or perhaps a natural disaster. Instead, he found a graveyard. The planet's surface was gray, not the gray of rock or ash, but a uniform metallic gray that covered every centimeter of the world. Cities, forests, oceans, everything had been converted into a smooth, lifeless surface. In orbit, the colony stations were torn apart, their metal hulls showing signs of being consumed from within. "What in the name of the first beings happened here?" Krell whispered, staring at the main view screen. His science officer, a young Talaxian named Saris, worked frantically at her console. "Admiral, I'm detecting no organic matter anywhere on or around the planet. No bodies, no plants, no bacteria. Everything's been converted into this metallic substance." "Converted how?" "I don't know. The composition is unlike anything in our databases. It's as if something broke down all organic and inorganic matter at the molecular level and reassembled it into this material." Krell's blood ran cold. "How long ago?" "Based on decay patterns of the orbital debris, approximately 72 hours. 3 days. An entire world of 8 million souls had been erased in 3 days. Krell was about to order a full retreat when his sensors officer shouted in alarm. "Contact!" Multiple contacts appearing at the system's edge. The view screen shifted to show the outer system. Space itself seemed to tear open, and through the wounds in reality came things that made Krell's mind struggle to process what he was seeing. They were ships, but not like any ships he had ever encountered. Organic and mechanical at once, they looked like massive insects made of metal and flesh, covered in appendages that writhed and pulsed. The smallest was 3 kilometers long. The largest was the size of a small moon. There were hundreds of them, battle stations, Krell ordered, but even as he spoke, he knew it was hopeless. The swarm moved with terrifying coordination. They didn't fire weapons in any conventional sense. Instead, they released clouds of smaller constructs, each no bigger than a shuttle, that flew toward the Council fleet like locusts. The Harmony's Voice opened fire with plasma cannons that could vaporize asteroids. The beam struck the incoming swarm and destroyed dozens of the smaller constructs. Hundreds more took their place. When the first construct latched onto a Council destroyer, it began to dissolve the ship's hull. Within minutes, the destroyer was gone, converted into more of the gray material which the construct consumed before moving to the next target. "All ships retreat," Krell ordered. "Fall back to Council space immediately." But the swarm was faster. Ship after ship fell silent as the constructs overwhelmed them. Krell watched as the Vigilant Star, a cruiser that had served for 200 years, was consumed in less than 5 minutes. The crew's final transmission was a sound that would haunt him forever. Not screams of pain, but of confusion as their own ship began to eat them alive. The Harmony's voice barely escaped, its hull scarred by constructs that had been destroyed at the last moment. Of the 30 ships that had entered the Thulo system, only 4 survived to tell the tale. Krell's report to the Council was broadcast across all civilized space. The recording showed the gray planet, the swarm, and the terrible efficiency with which they destroyed everything in their path. For the first time in 40,000 years, the Galactic Council knew fear. Councillor Vex Thari's crystalline hands shook as he read the reports. 12 more colonies had gone dark in the past week. The Devourers were real. They were here and they were unstoppable. The Council's military mobilized immediately, but they quickly discovered a terrible truth. They had no idea how to fight this enemy. Their weapons were designed for ship-to-ship combat, not for swarms of millions of small constructs that could dissolve anything they touched. Their tactics were based on 40,000 years of fighting civilized opponents who followed rules of engagement. The Devourers followed no rules. They simply consumed. In desperation, the Council did something they had never done before. They reached out to humanity. The message arrived at Earth's Orbital Command Center on a Tuesday morning. Admiral Marcus Webb, now commander of humanity's entire military, read it twice before believing what it said. "They want our help," he said to Ambassador Chen, who had remained on Earth to coordinate the defense preparations. Sarah looked older than her years. 5 years of stress and fear had carved lines into her face. "What are they offering in exchange?" "They're asking, not offering. They want us to send military advisors immediately. They need our help fighting the Devourers." Sarah's laugh was bitter and cold. "They quarantined us. They forbade us from preparing. They called us paranoid primitives. Now they want our help." Webb nodded slowly. "What should we tell them?" Sarah was silent for a long moment, staring at the holographic display that showed Earth's defenses. Thousands of automated weapons platforms, millions of mines, ships designed specifically to fight a swarm enemy, weapons that the Council would consider horrifying but that humanity had built anyway, because survival mattered more than approval. "Send them one ship," she said finally. "The Cassandra, a frigate with a full sensor suite and a small advisory team. Tell them that's all we can legally send without violating the quarantine they placed on our military." Webb's eyes widened. "Sarah, they're facing extinction." "So are we." Sarah's voice cracked. "They had 5 years to prepare. 5 years we spent begging them to take this seriously. They laughed at us, Marcus. They mocked us. They told us we were primitive and afraid of shadows. Now the shadows are real and they want us to save them. If the Council falls, we'll be alone against the Devourers." "We've been alone from the beginning," Sarah said quietly. "Send the Cassandra. Let them see what we tried to warn them about. Maybe they'll finally understand what they've done." The UNSV Cassandra arrived at Council Station Alpha 2 weeks later. Captain Maria Santos, a veteran of Earth's colonial wars, stood on the bridge and looked at the chaos around her. Council ships rushed in and out of the station, carrying refugees from fallen colonies. The organized majesty of galactic civilization was crumbling in real time. She was escorted to an emergency session of the Council, where Vexathari himself greeted her. The proud Calothian looked diminished somehow. His crystalline form dimmed. "Captain Santos, thank you for responding to our request. We need humanity's assistance immediately. The Devourers are advancing faster than we can evacuate colonies. Our military is suffering catastrophic losses. We need ships, weapons, tactical coordination." Maria looked at him with eyes that held no sympathy. "Counselor, with respect, my ship is a frigate. A small one. I have a crew of 200 and exactly 43 missiles. I am here as an observer and advisor as requested. That's not enough. We need your full military commitment." "You quarantined us," Maria said flatly. "You forbade us from expanding our military beyond our own territory. You said we were spreading panic. This ship is all we can legally send under the restrictions you placed on us." Vexathari's form flickered with distress. "Captain, I was wrong. The Council was wrong. We should have listened. But this is not the time for I told you so. Billions of lives are at stake." Maria studied him for a long moment. "Ambassador Chen told you 5 years ago that this was coming." "She showed you the evidence. She begged you to prepare. You called her primitive and paranoid. You laughed at our warnings." "I know," Vexathari whispered, "and I will carry that shame until I die. But please, humanity has prepared. You have weapons, strategies. Help us, what we have prepared, Maria agreed. For 5 years, while you did nothing, we turned our entire civilization into a war machine. Every human knows how to fight. Every resource has been committed to defense. We did this because we knew no one else would save us. She pulled up a holographic display showing the swarm's current position. They're 3 weeks from Earth. The Devourers are coming for us too, Counselor. And when they arrive, we'll fight them with everything we have, alone, just like we've been preparing to do. Then fight them here. Fight them with us. Maria shook her head. My orders are to observe, advise, and return to Earth with intelligence on the Devourers' tactics. That's all. As she turned to leave, Vexithari called out one last time. When your homeworld burns, Captain Santos, will you remember this moment? Will you remember that you could have helped save the galaxy? Maria stopped at the door and looked back at him. When Earth burns, Counselor, we'll remember that we begged you to help us prepare and you left us to die alone. At least we'll die knowing we tried to warn you. The Cassandra remained at Council Station for 2 weeks, observing as the Devourers systematically destroyed colony after colony. Maria's team gathered data, analyzed the swarm's tactics, and transmitted everything back to Earth. The Devourers were even worse than humanity had feared. They didn't just destroy civilizations, they consumed them entirely, converting all matter into more constructs for the swarm. They learned and adapted with terrifying speed. And they were heading straight for the most densely populated regions of Council space. On the 15th day, Maria received an encrypted message from Earth. It contained only 3 words. Come home now. The long-range sensors had detected it. A massive branch of the swarm had split from the main force and was heading directly for Sol System. The Devourers had found Earth. As the Cassandra made the jump to hyperspace, Maria stood on the bridge and looked back at the Council territories. Somewhere out there, Vexithari and the others were fighting desperately against an enemy they had refused to believe in. Humanity was about to face that same enemy, but unlike the Council, humanity had been preparing for this moment since the day their warnings were ignored. Earth's warnings had fallen on deaf ears. Now the galaxy was burning, and humanity was about to learn exactly what they were capable of when survival was the only option left. The deep space warning stations were the first to see them coming. Thousands of contacts appearing at the edge of Sol System, moving with the terrible purpose that Captain Santos had described in her reports. The Devourers had arrived. Admiral Marcus Webb stood in Earth's orbital command center, watching the tactical displays with the calm of a man who had prepared for this moment every day for 5 years. Around him, officers worked at their stations with quiet efficiency. There was no panic, no fear in their voices. Every person in this room had trained for this day. Every person knew what was at stake. Distance to contact, Webb asked. 3 hours at current speed, replied Commander Jackson, a stern woman with gray streaks in her black hair. The swarm is bigger than we estimated. Preliminary count shows at least 15,000 major constructs and millions of smaller ones. Webb nodded slowly. Execute Protocol Midnight. All civilian populations to underground shelters. Activate all orbital defense platforms. Contact Mars, Venus, and the outer colonies. Tell them to implement their contingencies. Sir, Mars is requesting permission to proceed with Operation Glass House. Webb closed his eyes for a moment. Glass House was a last resort, a doomsday protocol that would render Mars uninhabitable to deny the enemy resources. The fact that they were already asking meant they knew what was coming. Permission granted. May they forgive us. Across Sol System, humanity moved with practiced precision. On Mars, the 5 million colonists evacuated to deep bunkers as nuclear weapons were positioned across the surface. On Venus's floating cities, people boarded transports that would take them to Earth. The asteroid miners armed their ships and prepared to fight. Even the research station on Pluto activated weapons that had been hidden in plain sight for years. The Galactic Council had forbidden humanity from building certain types of weapons. Humanity had built them anyway and had hidden them where no one was looking. The Devourers entered the system like a plague of locusts. Their constructs moved in formations that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. The vanguard consisted of millions of small drones, each designed to latch onto targets and begin the consumption process. Behind them came the larger constructs, ship-sized horrors that served as mobile factories, converting consumed matter into more drones. They headed straight for Mars, Governor Patricia Chen, Sarah's younger sister watched from the command bunker as the swarm descended on her world. All personnel to shelters. Execute Glasshouse in 30 seconds. The countdown felt like an eternity. Patricia thought about the cities she had helped build, the terraforming projects that had taken decades, the homes where children had been born under Martian sky. All of it was about to turn to glass and ash. Execute. The nuclear weapons detonated simultaneously across Mars's surface. Hundreds of warheads turned the thin atmosphere into a hell of fire and radiation. The temperature spiked to thousands of degrees. The carefully cultivated soil became molten glass. The domes that had protected millions shattered and melted. The Devourer's drones descended into this inferno and died by the millions. The heat and radiation disrupted their molecular conversion process, but they kept coming wave after wave, trying to reach something, anything they could consume. "It's working," Patricia whispered, watching the tactical displays. "They can't consume what's already been destroyed." But even as Mars burned, the main swarm bypassed the dead world and continued toward Earth. The orbital defense platforms opened fire when the Devourers reached the designated kill zone. Thousands of automated weapons unleashed hell in the form of kinetic accelerators, plasma cannons, and missiles equipped with nuclear warheads. The Devourers' drones died in their millions, brilliant explosions painting the void in fire. But for every drone that died, 10 more took its place. "They're adapting," Commander Jackson reported. "Subsequent waves are showing increased resistance to our weapons." "Then we adapt faster," Webb said. "Activate the Reaper drones." Humanity had spent 5 years studying every piece of data about the Devourers. They had learned that the constructs relied on a form of quantum communication to coordinate. Disrupt that communication, and the swarm became less efficient. The Reaper drones were Earth's answer. Small, fast, and equipped with experimental quantum scramblers, they dove into the swarm like piranhas. They didn't try to destroy the Devourer's constructs. Instead, they broadcast interference patterns that disrupted the swarm's coordination. The effect was immediate. The perfect formations of the swarm began to break apart. Constructs collided with each other. The advance slowed. "It's working," Jackson shouted. "We're buying time." "Not enough," Webb said grimly, watching as more and more Devourers poured into the system. "They'll overwhelm us through sheer numbers. Contact Earth Defense Command. Tell them to prepare for ground assault." On Earth's surface, 9 billion people waited in shelters that had been built into the bedrock of every continent. They had supplies for months, weapons for everyone old enough to hold them, and the grim determination that came from knowing this was the last stand. Lieutenant David Park stood in the streets of Seoul, looking up at the sky where the battle raged in orbit. He was 23 years old, and he had been training for this moment since he was 18. Around him, his squad checked their weapons and prepared their positions. "Think we'll survive this, Lieutenant?" asked Private Martinez, a young woman with tattoos covering both arms. David didn't lie to her. "I think we'll make them pay for every meter they take." The first Devourer's constructs broke through the orbital defense network 3 hours after the battle began. They fell toward Earth like burning meteors, thousands of them, aiming for the planet's major cities. The ground-based defenses opened fire. Railguns, missiles, and energy weapons filled the sky with destruction, but some of the constructs got through. One landed in Seoul, right in the middle of the city. It was massive, 50 meters tall, and it began immediately converting everything around it. Buildings dissolved. Streets turned to gray sludge. The air itself seemed to shimmer as the construct's conversion field spread outward. "All units, engage," David ordered. His squad opened fire with weapons designed specifically for this fight. Plasma rifles that could melt through the construct's armor, grenades that released electromagnetic pulses, even experimental nanite weapons that tried to disrupt the construct's molecular structure. The construct staggered under the assault but kept advancing. For every piece they destroyed, it regenerated by consuming more matter around it. "Fall back. Draw it toward the kill zone," David ordered. His squad retreated in good order, firing as they went. The construct followed, consuming everything in its path. It was exactly what they wanted. As soon as it reached the designated area, David triggered the trap. Buried charges detonated beneath the construct's feet, dropping it into a pit filled with molten metal. The construct screamed, a sound that shouldn't have been possible for something mechanical, and tried to climb out. More charges detonated, collapsing the pit and burying the construct under tons of superheated steel. "Target neutralized," David reported, But even as he spoke, he could see more constructs falling from the sky. The battle for Earth had truly begun. For 87 days, humanity fought. Every city became a battleground. Every street was contested. The Devourers learned and adapted, but so did humanity. When plasma weapons became less effective, humans switched to kinetic weapons. When the constructs started ignoring individual soldiers, humanity used their cities as weapons, collapsing buildings onto the enemy and filling tunnels with fire. On the 40th day, the Devourers tried to land a massive construct in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, intending to consume the water itself and use it to create more drones. The naval fleets responded by detonating underwater nuclear weapons, creating a maelstrom that tore the construct apart. On the 62nd day, when the orbital platforms were finally overwhelmed and destroyed, humanity revealed weapons they had kept hidden on the moon. Massive railguns built into the lunar surface opened fire, hurling projectiles at near-relativistic speeds into the swarm. The Galactic Council watched in horror as humans fought with a ferocity they had never witnessed. Children barely old enough to walk carried ammunition to soldiers. Scientists developed new weapons in laboratories built in bunkers miles underground. Elderly citizens who could no longer fight used themselves as bait to lure constructs into traps. The turning point came on the 78th day. Dr. Sarah Chen, who had spent 5 years studying the Devourers, finally cracked their quantum communication code. She discovered the location of the central node, the massive construct that coordinated the entire swarm in Sol system. "It's hiding behind the moon," she reported to Admiral Webb. "It's been there the whole time, directing the assault while staying out of range." Webb stared at the tactical display for a long moment. "How do we kill it?" "We can't reach it with conventional weapons. It's too well protected." "Then we use unconventional weapons." The lunar base had one more secret. Hidden in a crater on the far side of the moon was a weapon humanity had built in violation of every galactic treaty. It was called the Stellar Lance, and it was designed to fire a concentrated beam of energy powerful enough to crack a moon in half. "Sir, if we fire that weapon, the Council will know we've been developing prohibited technology," Commander Jackson warned. Webb looked at her with tired eyes. "The Council isn't here, Commander. We are, and we're dying. Fire the weapon." The Stellar Lance charged for 30 seconds, drawing power from fusion reactors built deep into the lunar crust. When it fired, the beam was visible from Earth, a pillar of light that reached out and touched the Devourer's central node. The massive construct tried to move, tried to shield itself, but it was too late. The beam punched through its defenses and struck the core. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the construct exploded with the force of a small sun. Across Earth, the Devourer's forces suddenly became uncoordinated. The drones crashed or wandered aimlessly. The larger constructs fought on, but without the terrible efficiency they had shown before. "All units counterattack," Webb ordered. "Drive them off our world." Humanity surged forward. Soldiers who had been fighting defensive battles for months suddenly went on the offensive. Ships that had been hiding in the asteroid belt returned to Earth and began hunting down the remaining constructs. The Devourers, for the first time since they had arrived, began to retreat. On the 87th day, the last Devourer construct was destroyed over Beijing. Lieutenant David Park stood in the ruins of Seoul and watched the sky clear for the first time in 3 months. He was covered in burns and scars, and he had lost half his squad. But he was alive. Earth was alive. The cost was terrible. 4,200 million dead. Entire cities reduced to gray sludge before being reclaimed. The planet's surface scarred beyond recognition. But humanity had survived. Admiral Webb stood in what remained of the orbital command center and transmitted a message on all galactic frequencies. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollow, but his voice was steady and cold. "To the Galactic Council, you left us to die. You refused our warnings, mocked our preparations, and quarantined us from receiving help. We stood alone against the Devourers, and we survived. 4 billion of our people are dead. Our world is scarred. Our cities are ruins. Remember this when you look at the stars and wonder why humanity does not forgive. Remember that you had the chance to stand with us and you chose to stand aside. That was your last mistake." The message ended. Webb looked out at Earth, at the gray patches that marked where cities had been consumed, at the fires still burning in some regions, at the millions of survivors crawling from their shelters to see what remained of their world. The Devourers had struck Earth with everything they had. Earth had struck back harder. But the battle was not over. The main swarm was still out there, still consuming council worlds. And humanity, bloodied but unbroken, was about to teach the galaxy a lesson it would never forget. The age of humanity's patience had ended. The age of humanity's wrath was about to begin. 6 months after the siege of Earth ended, humanity emerged from Sol's system like a storm of cold fury. The 9 billion who survived had become something different. Every civilian was now military. Every resource existed for one purpose. Every heartbeat was dedicated to a single mission: the complete eradication of the Devourers and anyone who stood in the way. The Terran War. Fleet launched from Earth's orbit in formations that would have terrified the old Galactic Council. 5,000 warships, each one designed with technology that violated a dozen galactic treaties. Humanity no longer cared about treaties. The species that had written those treaties had left Earth to burn alone. Admiral Marcus Webb commanded the fleet from the flagship UNSV Retribution, a massive dreadnought built from the ashes of humanity's dead cities. On his command chair, someone had carved 4 words into the metal. 4 billion demand justice. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from Council Station Alpha, Commander Jackson reported. They're requesting immediate military assistance. The Devourers have broken through the defensive line at the Korvax sector. Webb studied the tactical display. The Korvax sector contained 12 inhabited worlds, including the Kalothian homeworld. Billions of lives hung in the balance. What are they offering in exchange for our help? Webb asked coldly. Jackson looked uncomfortable. They're not offering, sir. They're asking. They say it's our moral duty to help. Webb's laugh was bitter. Our moral duty. Tell them we'll consider their request. First, they need to meet our terms, which are complete military command of all Council forces in the affected sectors, full access to all Council technology and manufacturing facilities, unrestricted authority to use any weapons we deem necessary, and they will formally acknowledge that they were wrong to ignore our warnings. Jackson transmitted the terms. The response came back within minutes. The Council agreed to everything. The Terran war fleet arrived at Korvax sector 30 hours later. The situation was worse than the intelligence reports had suggested. 3 worlds were already gone, converted to gray wastelands. The Devourer's swarm had grown massive, feeding on the densely populated Council territories. Councillor Vexithari himself was there, commanding the defense fleet from his flagship. When Webb's face appeared on his view screen, the Kalothian looked older, dimmer. The pride that had once defined him was gone, burned away by months of losing worlds. Admiral Webb, thank you for coming. We desperately need your help. The swarm is advancing on my homeworld. 4 billion Kalothians are counting on you. Webb's face was expressionless. Counselor, 5 years ago, 9 billion humans were counting on you. Do you remember what you did? Vexithari's crystalline form flickered with what might have been shame. I remember. I will carry that shame until I die. But please, this is not about me. This is about innocent lives. Every life that dies today dies because you refused to prepare when you had the chance, Webb said flatly. But we're here now. Transfer command of your fleet to Commander Jackson. We'll handle this. The Council ships fell under human command, and the fleet began implementing tactics that made the Council officers sick to watch. Humanity didn't fight the Devourers the way civilized species fought. They fought like the Devourers themselves, with absolute ruthlessness and zero regard for anything except victory. When the swarm attacked a Council colony ship full of refugees, Webb ordered human ships to use the colony ship as bait. The Devourers swarmed it, and then the humans detonated a weapon that released a wave of energy that disrupted molecular bonds. The colony ship died along with the Devourers attacking it. 2,000 civilians sacrificed to kill 10,000 constructs. You murdered those people. Vexithari screamed over the comm. They were already dead, Webb replied calmly. The Devourers would have consumed them. We used their deaths to save millions more. This is war, Counselor. Real war. Not the civilized conflicts you're used to. On the ground, human forces fought with technology that horrified Council observers. They deployed nanite weapons that dissolved Devourer constructs at the molecular level, but also dissolved anything organic nearby. They used biological weapons engineered specifically to target the organic components of the Devourers, weapons so deadly that 3 galactic conventions had banned them. When asked about these violations, Colonel Sarah Chen, now leading ground operations, gave a simple answer. The Devourers don't follow your conventions. Neither will we. The battle for Korvac sector lasted 3 weeks. In the end, humanity saved 8 of the 12 worlds. The cost was horrifying by Council standards. 16 million civilians died in the crossfire. Entire cities were leveled by human bombardments to deny the Devourers resources. 3 colony worlds were evacuated, and then cracked open by human weapons to create debris fields that slowed the swarm. But the Devourers were pushed back. For the first time since the war began, they retreated without achieving their objective. Vexithari stood on the bridge of his ship, watching the human fleet prepare to leave. He had witnessed things that would haunt him forever. He had seen humans use civilians as bait, deploy weapons that killed indiscriminately, and make decisions that valued victory over mercy. But his homeworld still existed. 4 billion Colothians lived because of those terrible decisions. Admiral Webb, Vexithari said quietly over a private channel, I owe you the lives of my people, but what you did here, the weapons you used, the tactics you employed. The Council cannot allow such methods to continue once this war is over. Webb's face on the view screen was cold as ice. Counselor, do you remember what you said to Ambassador Chen 5 years ago? You said we were primitive and afraid. You were right. We are primitive. We come from a world where we fought each other for thousands of years. We know war in ways you've forgotten. He leaned forward. You asked for our help, we gave it. We saved your people using methods that work. If you don't like those methods, you're welcome to fight the Devourers yourselves. That's not what I meant. I'm grateful, but nothing, Webb interrupted. You want us to save you, but you want us to do it nicely. You want us to be gentle saviors who follow your rules. That's not what we are. We're survivors, and we survived by being willing to do what you won't. The Terran war fleet moved from sector to sector, driving the Devourers back through tactics that became infamous across the galaxy. They developed AI-guided drone swarms that hunted Devourers through hyperspace. They created weapons that Council scientists had considered theoretically possible, but morally unconscionable. They fought with a brutality that came from having already lost everything that mattered. Word spread across Council space. When humans arrived to defend a world, they brought salvation at a terrible price. They would save you, but they would make decisions that no Council species would make. They would sacrifice thousands to save millions. They would destroy your cities to deny the enemy resources. They would use weapons banned by every civilized convention. But they won. Every time they won. On the bridge of the Retribution, Webb maintained a wall of photos. 4 billion photos, one for every human who died during the siege of Earth. He looked at them every day, letting the weight of those deaths fuel his resolve. Sir, we're receiving a distress call from Talaxia Prime, Jackson reported. The Devourers are 3 days away from the planet. The Talaxian government is requesting assistance. Tell them our terms. They already know the terms, sir. They're begging. They say they'll agree to anything. Webb studied the tactical display. Talaxia Prime was home to 8 billion people. It was also a manufacturing center that could be converted to produce human weapons. We'll save them, but they will pay the price afterward. Every resource, every factory, every scientist will be put toward the war effort. No exceptions. The pattern repeated across Council space. Humanity saved worlds but demanded total cooperation in return. Council species watched in horror as their industrial capacity was converted to produce human weapons. Their best scientists were recruited to human research teams. Their military forces were integrated into human command structures. The Galactic Council, what remained of it, met in emergency session. The topic was not how to defeat the Devourers. That question had been answered. Humanity knew how to fight them. The question was what to do about humanity. They're taking over, argued Counselor Prax, a Morvathi elder. They arrive as saviors and leave as conquerors. They've seized control of 37 industrial sectors. They've militarized civilian populations. They're turning our civilization into a war machine. They're keeping us alive, countered Counselor Thessa, a younger Talaxian. My homeworld exists because of human intervention. Yes, they demanded concessions. Yes, their methods are brutal. But we're still alive to argue about it. Thulax, the ancient Morvathi who had dismissed humanity's warning so long ago, spoke in his grinding voice. The humans are changing. I have lived for 3,000 years and seen many species rise. What I see in humanity now frightens me more than the Devourers. They are becoming something dark. They were always dark, Vexithari said quietly. We just didn't see it because they hid it behind diplomacy and hope. When we abandoned them, we forced them to reveal what they truly are. We created this. Then what do we do? Prax demanded. We survive, Vexthari said. We accept their help. We follow their lead, and we pray that when this war ends, we can remind them how to be civilized again. But for now, they are our only hope. The human fleets pushed deeper into Devourer-controlled space, no longer simply defending Council worlds, but actively hunting the swarm. They developed a protocol called Reaper, an AI-guided system that tracked Devourers through hyperspace and attacked them before they could reach populated systems. The Devourers began to retreat, falling back toward the outer regions where they had first emerged. For the first time in the war, they seemed afraid. Colonel Sarah Chen led a strike team to a consumed world in the Outer Rim. They found something that changed everything. The Devourers weren't just mindless destroyers. They had a purpose, a goal. Every world they consumed was being converted into a massive structure. It's a gateway, Sarah reported to Webb. They're building something huge. If they complete it, analysis suggests it could open a permanent corridor to wherever they come from. Webb stared at the images. Then we destroy it before they finish. Sir, the gateway is protected by the largest concentration of Devourers we've ever seen. Millions of constructs, and behind them we detected something bigger, something we're calling the Queen. It seems to be the central intelligence for the entire swarm. Webb smiled for the first time in months. It was not a pleasant smile. Good. Then we know where to find them. We know where to end this. He opened a channel to the entire Terran war fleet. All ships prepare for Operation Final Answer. We're going to kill their queen, destroy their gateway, and end this war once and for all. And if we can't win, sir? Jackson asked quietly. Webb looked at the wall of 4 billion photos. Then we make sure they lose anyway. No forgiveness, no mercy. No rest until they're ash. The fleet moved toward the Outer Rim, toward the heart of Devourer space, toward the final battle that would determine the fate of the galaxy. Behind them, Council species watched and wondered what would be left of humanity if they survived. The answer, Webb knew, was nothing that resembled what they had been before. The species that had begged the Council for help 5 years ago was gone. What remained was something forged in the fires of Earth's crucible, something that would never again trust others for their survival. Humanity had become the monster necessary to fight monsters, and they were just getting started. The edge of known space was a graveyard of dead worlds. 73 civilizations had once called this region home before the last Devourer cycle 50,000 years ago. Now only ruins remained, and at the center of it all, the gateway pulsed with terrible energy. Admiral Marcus Webb stood on the bridge of the Retribution and studied the tactical display. The structure was massive, larger than Earth's moon, built from the converted matter of countless worlds. Around it, millions of Devourer constructs formed defensive shells that stretched for thousands of kilometers. And behind all of it, sensors detected something that made even hardened human soldiers nervous. Confirm size of target-designated Queen, Webb ordered. Confirmed, sir, Jackson replied, her voice tight. The central construct is approximately 400 kilometers in diameter. Energy readings suggest it contains the processing power to coordinate the entire Devourer swarm across multiple star systems simultaneously. Webb nodded slowly. So we cut off the head and the body dies. That's the theory, sir. But reaching it means fighting through defensive layers that include an estimated 3 million major constructs and billions of drones. What's our fleet strength? 5,200 warships. Another 8,000 Council ships have joined us, though their effectiveness is questionable. The Council forces had come, drawn by humanity's success and terrified of being left defenseless if humanity fell, but they followed human orders now. The proud civilizations that had once ruled the galaxy for 40,000 years now took commands from a species that had been spacefaring for less than a century. Counselor Vexithari requested a private channel. Webb accepted it, and the Kalothian's face appeared on a screen. Admiral, my tactical officers believe this is suicide. We're outnumbered 500 to 1. Even with your advanced weapons, the odds are impossible. Then it's good we don't believe in impossible, Webb replied. This isn't bravery, Admiral. This is madness. We could retreat, consolidate our forces, develop new strategies. And while we do that, the gateway completes, and billions more Devourers pour through. No, Counselor. We end this today or we don't end it at all. Vexithari was silent for a moment. You've changed so much from the species we first met. The humans who came to us 5 years ago wanted peace, cooperation, understanding. Now you speak only of destruction. Webb's expression hardened. 5 years ago we had hope. Then you took that hope away. You left us to die, and we learned that in this galaxy, only strength matters. Only victory matters. You taught us that lesson well. We were wrong. I've said it before and I'll say it again. We were wrong. Your apology doesn't bring back the 4 billion dead on Earth, but it's a start. Webb cut the channel. The fleet moved into position. Humanity had one advantage that the Devourers hadn't encountered before. They were willing to use weapons that no civilized species would consider. The Council had spent 40,000 years building a civilization based on rules, on conventions, on the idea that some things were too terrible to use even in war. Humanity had learned a different lesson from their history. In war, there was only one rule: survive. Begin Operation Final Answer, Webb ordered. The first wave consisted of 10,000 missiles, each one powered by antimatter warheads that violated 3 separate galactic conventions. They screamed toward the Devourer defensive lines at near light speed, too fast for the constructs to intercept all of them. The explosions lit up the darkness of space like artificial suns. Millions of Devourer drones vaporized in an instant, but millions more took their place. Second wave, Launch Reaper drones. The AI-guided drones poured from the human ships like a swarm of their own. They didn't target the Devourers directly. Instead, they dove into the enemy formations and released quantum scramblers, disrupting the communication that let the swarm coordinate. The effect was immediate. The perfect defensive formations broke apart. Constructs collided with each other. The defensive shells began to crack. Third wave, all ships advance and engage. The human fleet charged forward, weapons blazing. They didn't try to destroy every Devourer construct. That was impossible. Instead, they punched through the defensive lines like a spear, aiming for the heart of the formation where the Queen waited. The battle became chaos. Devourer constructs swarmed over human ships, trying to consume them. Human ships fired at point-blank range, sometimes destroying constructs by ramming them at full speed. When ships were too damaged to fight, their crews aimed them at high-value targets and detonated their reactors. Colonel Sarah Chen led the ground assault team. Their mission was simple and insane: board the Queen construct and plant a weapon at its core. The weapon was called the Stellar Drill, the same type that had saved Earth, except this one was 10 times more powerful. If we detonate this inside the Queen, what happens? One of her soldiers asked. The explosion will create a temporary black hole, Sarah explained. Everything within 10,000 kilometers gets pulled in and crushed, including us. So this is a suicide mission. Every mission against the Devourers is a suicide mission. At least this one ends the war. They launched from the Retribution in heavily armed shuttles, protected by an escort of fighters. The journey through the battle was a nightmare. Constructs attacked from every direction. Ships exploded around them, but they pushed forward, losing escorts one by one until only Sarah's shuttle remained. They crashed into the Queen's surface, the impact killing 3 of her 12-person team instantly. The survivors cut their way inside using plasma torches, entering a nightmare landscape of organic and mechanical passages that pulsed with alien intelligence. The Queen knew they were there. Constructs poured toward them from every direction. Sarah's team fought with weapons designed for exactly this situation: nanite grenades that dissolved everything in their path, plasma rifles that could cut through the densest armor, and when weapons failed, they fought with knives in their bare hands. "Keep moving," Sarah ordered, even as another soldier fell to a construct's blade-like appendage. "We're close!" They could feel it now, a vibration that ran through the entire structure. The Queen's core was ahead, and it was aware of them. It knew what they carried. It was trying to stop them. The last 300 meters took an hour. Sarah's team was down to 4 people, all of them wounded, but they reached the core, a massive chamber where something that might have been a brain or a computer pulsed with terrible energy. "Plant the device," Sarah ordered. They set up the Stellar Drill, arming it with trembling hands. The countdown began. 10 minutes until detonation. "Extract is impossible, Colonel," one of her soldiers said, looking at the tactical display. The path they had carved through the Queen was sealing itself, filled with constructs hunting them. "I know," Sarah said quietly. She thought about her sister, Ambassador Chen, who had tried so hard to save the galaxy through diplomacy. She thought about the 4 billion dead on Earth. She thought about all the lessons humanity had learned about the cost of survival. "It was an honor serving with you," she said to her team. They nodded. No one tried to run. They had known from the beginning how this would end. On the Retribution, Admiral Webb watched as the timer counted down. He knew Sarah Chen was still inside the Queen. He knew she and her team had no way out, but he also knew they had succeeded in their mission. "All ships emergency retreat," he ordered. "Maximum speed. Get clear of the blast zone." The human and council fleets turned and fled, pursued by devourers, constructs that were becoming increasingly frantic as the Queen's commands became erratic. Inside the Queen, Sarah and her team sat in the core chamber, listening to the stellar drill count down its final seconds. Around them, constructs pounded on the sealed door, trying desperately to reach them. 5 seconds, Sarah said. "Anyone have any famous last words?" "Yeah," said Corporal Martinez, bleeding from a dozen wounds. "Fuck you, devourers. Humanity sends its regards." The stellar drill detonated. For a fraction of a second, it created a singularity, a point of infinite density and gravity. The Queen's core collapsed inward, and then everything within 10,000 kilometers was pulled in. The Queen died in an instant, her vast intelligence crushed to nothing. The gateway, no longer powered by the Queen's coordination, began to tear itself apart. The devourer constructs across the battlefield suddenly went dark, their connection to the controlling intelligence severed. Admiral Webb watched in silence as millions of devourer constructs simply stopped functioning and drifted in space like dead metal. The swarm that had terrorized the galaxy for months was gone in an instant. "Did we win?" Jackson asked quietly. Webb looked at the display showing where the Queen had been, where Sarah Chen and her team had made their sacrifice. "Yes, we won." The cost of victory was calculated over the following weeks. Of the 5,000 human ships that entered the battle, only 800 survived. 30 million soldiers dead. The Council forces fared even worse, losing 90% of their fleet. But the devourers were gone. Every construct, every drone, every piece of the swarm had gone dark when the Queen died. The gateway collapsed into debris. The threat that had emerged every 50,000 years was ended. The Galactic Council met in emergency session on what remained of Council Station Alpha. The chamber was half empty. Many species had been nearly wiped out. Others had lost faith in the Council entirely and withdrawn to rebuild their own territories. Councillor Vexithari stood before the assembly, looking older and more fragile than ever. "We are here to discuss the future of galactic civilization. The devourers are gone thanks to humanity's sacrifice, but we must now address the question of what comes next." Thulox, the ancient Morvathi, spoke in his grinding voice. "What comes next is simple. Humanity must disarm. Their weapons violate every convention we have established. Their methods of warfare are too brutal to be allowed to continue." A wave of agreement went through some of the council members, but others, especially those from species that humanity had saved, remained silent. Admiral Webb, who had been invited to address the council, stood and looked across the assembly. "You want us to disarm. You want us to give up the weapons and tactics that saved you. You want us to go back to being the peaceful, cooperative species we were 5 years ago." "Yes," Vexthari said. "We understand your anger, Admiral. We understand your pain. But the war is over. It's time to rebuild civilization, and that means returning to the principles that guided us for 40,000 years. Webb's laugh was cold and bitter. 40,000 years of peace because no one challenged you. 40,000 years of comfort because you faced no real threats. Then the devourers came, and your civilization crumbled in months. We saved you, Counselor. We saved all of you. And now you want us to disarm so you can feel safe again. We want the galaxy to be governed by law, not by fear," Thulox said. "Your laws failed. Your conventions failed. Your entire civilization failed when it mattered most. The only thing that succeeded was human ruthlessness and human sacrifice." Webb gestured to the holographic display behind him, showing images of Earth, scarred and wounded. 4 billion of my people died because you wouldn't help us. We begged you to prepare, and you laughed at us. We warned you the devourers were coming, and you quarantined us for spreading panic. You had the chance to stand with us, and you chose to abandon us." The chamber was silent. "We will never be that vulnerable again," Webb continued, his voice hard as steel. "We will never again trust others for our survival. Humanity will maintain the largest military fleet in this galaxy. We will keep our weapons, even the ones you consider barbaric, and we will defend ourselves with whatever means necessary." "Then you doom us all to an arms race," Vexathari said quietly. "If humanity refuses to disarm, other species will build weapons to match yours. The peace we built will shatter." "Your peace was an illusion," Webb replied. "It existed because you were lucky enough not to face a real threat. Now you have faced one, and you survived only because we were willing to do what you wouldn't. If that makes you uncomfortable, if that frightens you, then maybe fear is what you need to stay prepared." He turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing, Counselor. Colonel Sarah Chen and 300,000 soldiers died ending this war. They died saving your civilizations. Their sacrifice earned humanity something you can never take away. It earned us respect, and it earned us the right to never again ask permission to survive." Webb left the chamber. Behind him, the council dissolved into argument. Some species demanded action against humanity. Others argued for cooperation. A few, those who had witnessed human warfare up close, simply remained silent, knowing that any action against humanity would end badly. In the weeks that followed, humanity established what they called the Terran Accord. It was simple. Human space would be sovereign, defended by the largest military fleet in the galaxy. Any threat to human worlds would be met with overwhelming force. Any request for human assistance would come at a steep price. Some council species were outraged. Others were grateful just to be alive. But all of them understood one fundamental truth. Humanity had changed the balance of power in the galaxy forever. Counselor Vexathari requested a private meeting with Admiral Webb one last time. They met on a human station orbiting Earth, where the Colothian could see the scars of the siege that had transformed humanity. "I came to apologize," Vexathari said quietly, "not as a counselor but as an individual. I was wrong to dismiss your warnings. I was wrong to leave you to die. My arrogance cost billions of lives, human and otherwise. I will carry that shame for the rest of my life." Webb studied him for a long moment. "Your apology doesn't bring back our dead, Counselor, but it's more than most have offered. I accept it." "What will humanity become now?" Vexathari asked. "You've saved the galaxy, but at what cost to yourselves? I see the children on your streets, and they carry weapons as easily as they carry books. I see your people, and they look at the stars with eyes that hold no joy, only vigilance. You've become a warrior civilization." "We've become survivors," Webb corrected. "We learned the hard way that the galaxy is not kind to the weak or the unprepared. We will never again be either. And if another threat emerges, will you fight it alone, or will you allow others to stand with you?" Webb looked out at Earth, at the world that had burned and survived. "If another threat comes, we'll evaluate it based on one simple principle. Can we trust you to stand with us when it matters, or will you abandon us again? Actions, Counselor, not words. Show us we can trust you, and maybe someday, humanity will remember how to hope again." Vexathari left the station, and Webb stood alone, looking at the memorial wall that now held 4,300,000 photos, every human who had died in the war, every sacrifice that had bought survival. A young officer approached, a woman barely 20 years old who had been a child when the war began. "Sir, there's a report. Long-range sensors detected an anomaly in the outer rim. It might be nothing, but the signature is similar to what we saw before the Devourers arrived." Webb felt a cold chill run down his spine, but he also felt something else: readiness, determination, the certainty that came from having survived the worst and knowing you could do it again. "Dispatch a scout fleet, full weapons and shields. If there's something out there, I want to know about it before it knows about us." "Yes, sir." "What should we tell the council?" Webb thought about it for a moment. "Nothing, not yet. We investigate first, confirm the threat, and then we decide what to tell them. If they've learned their lesson, they'll thank us for it. If they haven't," he trailed off. "If they haven't, sir, then we'll save them anyway." Webb said quietly. Because that's what we do. We survive. We protect our own. And we make sure that the monsters in the dark learn to fear us more than we fear them. The young officer nodded and left to carry out her orders. Webb remained at the window, watching Earth spin slowly in the void. His planet, his people, scarred, traumatized, transformed into something the galaxy had never seen before. Humanity's warnings had been ignored. The galaxy had burned, and from those ashes, humanity had emerged as the fire that would never go out. Not from fear, not from hatred, but from the simple, terrible determination to never again trust their survival to anyone but themselves. Somewhere in the darkness of space, new threats might be stirring. New wars might be coming, but humanity was ready. Humanity would always be ready, because they had learned the hardest lesson the galaxy could teach, that survival belonged to those who were willing to pay any price to ensure it, and humanity had already paid the ultimate price. Now they would make sure it counted for something. The stars looked down on Earth with cold indifference. Earth looked back with eyes full of fire and said without words, "We're still here. We survived. And we will never forget what it cost us." The age of humanity's innocence was over. The age of humanity's dominance had just begun.